this huge expansion of power needed for data centers. And whether that's AI driven or it's national security driven, it's a huge explosion of new demand for power. I think I was speaking with a gentleman from Microsoft, and he said that they open a new data center globally every 3 days.
Welcome to Leaders on a Mission. I'm your host, Simon Leach, and this is the show where we dive into the stories, the innovations, and the visionaries that are shaping the future of our planet in the fight against climate change. So today, I'm really thrilled to host Tim Vail, CEO of Ion Clean Energy, a company really at the forefront of carbon capture innovation. So please stay tuned for an inspiring conversation about impact, about innovation, and the journey to a sustainable future. And especially the journey of Tim, who's done this 7 or 8 times, Tim, right? So, so thanks very much for coming on today. It's great to have you on the show.
Well, Simon, really appreciate it. And it's exciting to be here and spread the message on climate change and technologies that can help us avoid some of the dire consequences of climate change. But, as you and I discussed before we got on, I've been doing this for my entire 40-year career. From Texas, originally was planning to be in the oil and gas industry, but in 1985, when I got out of school, there wasn't much of an industry to be hold of. So I always have been looking on the other side and have done some really interesting things. I've been in the wind business, solar. I ran General Motors fuel cell program in the early 2000s, where we learned a lot about hydrogen, compressed hydrogen fuel cells. I've built some of the biggest methanol plants in the world with green methanol and blue methanol. And so I've done a lot of different things and taken a company public and financed them all either through private or PE backed. And so kind of seen it all and really was pretty much semi-retired, sitting on some boards of some very interesting energy tech companies and was introduced to the Ion opportunity through one of my investors. And really liked the team here, really liked the founder and what they've done. And I just feel like carbon capture from natural gas power generation in particular is something that can have a real meaningful impact in carbon emissions going forward. And I wanted to be a part of it. And so since I joined in January of this year, we've really made some incredible gains here on getting the technology from the development stage into true commercialization.
Oh, awesome. So you dusted down your work, your suit and your shirt, and you thought semi-retirement wasn't for you and you'd give it another go, right?
Was just finished a almost 3-week trip on the road. So I'm wondering again whether it was the right decision. But here and just the enthusiasm of the team here and in some of the tailwinds, I like to say, in the industry, we're really starting to see the technology, permitting, some of the regulatory environment and the economics are all really starting to come together to make, decarbonized power, in particular, what we call the blue electron, something that is really, a product that can change the world. And we want to, Ion can be part of that. And we want to make sure that we spread the message and become, a recognized leader in the space.
Yeah, no, awesome. I mean, I was just having a look before. I'm no expert in this particular space. It was having a look. There's been so much kind of talk around some of the emissions from, like the gas emissions, etc. And I was having a look at, some of the amine-based kind of capture systems that are out there. And I didn't actually realize that stuff like this has existed, for a number of years, right? Before. But yeah, really fascinating to read about what you guys are doing and the difference you make. So maybe just kind of outline a little bit about maybe the scale of the problem and then a little bit about your solution at Ion Clean Energy.
Yeah, well, on the scale of the solution, it's really interesting. What we do very well, our technology, is we operate in what we call a low CO2, high oxygen flue gas environment. And that is natural gas power, whether it's a boiler or a turbine, that is a very hard to abate and capture that CO2.
Yeah.
You mentioned, Simon, that amines have been around for a while, and that's a really good thing, to be honest, because the technology around the actual plant that captures the CO2 and then removes it from the solvent that technology's been around for 100 years. So we're not having to really invent a bunch of new equipment. And, our projects are not first of its kind, or we're going to build this new mechanical claptrap with all the risk associated with it. For us, it's about the solvent itself. It's the chemical that is contained within that amine system that allows us to capture this very difficult CO2 and without the augmentation or increasing of percentage. And that's really what makes ion unique. And that unlocks a tremendous market opportunity. And I'm not sure how many of your listeners are familiar with the power business, but here in the United States, we have a fairly robust grid with utilities and independent power producers and private equity backed power plants that all supply the grid for our homes and businesses. But what's happened in the past 6 months really is driven by the electrification wave, which includes vehicles and electrification of buildings. But most importantly, I think all of us have read about, is this huge expansion of power needed for data centers. And whether that's AI driven or it's national security driven, it's a huge explosion of new demand for power. I think, I was speaking with a gentleman from Microsoft, and he said that they open a new data center globally every 3 days. It's just a massive wave. And these systems, these plants, they need power. And these hyperscalers have made commitments that they're going to use clean power. And they've been, tremendous buyers and promoters of green energy, both wind and solar, and geothermal, which has been excellent. But there's not enough of that. And there's not enough of it soon enough to be able to meet the demands that they have. And that's where I think, ion can really make a difference. Here in the U.S., traditionally been a flat market past 20 years on power generation. Now they're looking to add, depending on who you talk to, 20 or 30 to 50 gigawatts of capacity. That's like almost a 50% increase in overall generation capacity in the United States alone, much less the world. And how are you going to get the power necessary to do that? We've certainly read about interesting articles with Microsoft and Google talking about nuclear power and some of the other, more advanced things. Great stuff. Certainly going to be there, but it's going to be there in the future. What we need now is something that can provide them an immediate solution. And that's what we have created here at ION, what we call the blue electron, which is a verifiable wellhead to bus bar carbon intensity associated with that electron. So we can get to near zero or zero carbon intensity on an electron that can be delivered to a hyperscaler. And that is technically proven. We've published numerous scientific articles on it, and we can demonstrate that. And we've been able to do that through our piloting and working with some of our customers. But what we need to do is get that word out to the customers, to those end users, both the guys that are building and operating the data centers, but also the people that are buying those services, such as the hyperscalers like Microsoft, that, hey, guys, we can give you a third party, independently verifiable carbon, low or no carbon electron. And that is something that they're willing to pay a premium for. And so you couple that with the regulations that we have here in the United States and Europe, and it becomes a very viable product. It's something that can be done here in the next 3 to 5 years instead of the next 20 to 30.
Got it. That's the key thing, isn't it? Right? Because you hear about some of the hydrogen and the green hydrogen and the nuclear, but they're just going to take so long to kind of build that capability, right?
Yeah, and all good stuff. I mean, I've been in the space. I did the world's largest stationary fuel cell deal with GM back in 2003. I know it well, and it's great, and it's great in the future. But the problem is, it's in the future, and we need these services, and we need this data expansion, and we need enough grid power for the electric cars, and we need it now. And natural gas and clean, decarbonized natural gas can be a real part of the mix, and we're really starting to see a change in belief around that, and that's primarily driven by companies like ION that can really show that it can be done right. And we want to be on the vanguard of that. And that's why I joined ION. That's why I'm back, is to make this transition occur.
No, great. Look, I'd love to just dive, I don't need to go too deep into it, but I'd love to understand a little bit more about the innovation, for instance, and about tell us a little bit about the story, where it came from or where it was developed.
Sure. As we discussed, amines have been around. They've been in the oil and gas field. They've been in the refinery business. They've been in the carbon capture business. An amine system is pretty well understood. The challenge with traditional amines is that they degrade fairly rapidly in a flue gas environment. So, you got a turbine or you got a boiler and it's burning natural gas and out of that comes oxygen and CO2 and nitrogen. And that all reacts with these amines because, that's what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to be reactive. But unfortunately, the older style amines start to break down. The bonds that hold those molecules together break down, and then they become aerosolized. And that creates regulated emissions. So you create VOCs. You're pulling CO2 out, but now you're creating something that has been banned for many years. And so that has been the challenge of, particularly in the power industry, is to be able to build an amine capture plant that can operate without producing these regulated emissions and do so efficiently. And so our founder, Dr. Brown, in 2008, well before anybody really cared about this space, he came from the pharmaceutical side of the world. In fact, was head of Yale's scientific or medical technology development. And he said, look, I can combine amines that are in the pharmaceutical space and make a better mousetrap. We can make a better solvent. And that solvent will not degrade. It will not produce the emissions. And so originally, some initial technology from the University of Colorado up here in Boulder, Colorado. Buzz moved his family up here, opened the office, started developing that. And now over time, we're into our third generation solvent and with very, very high performance. And during that time of development, he was able to achieve over $85 million of non-dilutive funding from the U.S. Department of Energy. And this is peer-reviewed, highly competitive grants. And over again, Dr. Brown's or ION's solution or solvent would win out over everybody else. And it's because we really, what he likes to say and I like to say is the science is in our solvent. And that really sets us apart. So we can operate in basically a typical amine facility, but we can do it without the energy penalty and without the emissions penalty associated with traditional amine. Through that time period, the team here was able to pilot the technology at the National Carbon Capture Center twice, Technology Center Monstrad in Norway twice. We've built our own pilot that's operating with the power plant in California with Calpine. And we have over 14,000 hours of testing on our solvents and demonstrate that we have very low degradation, low VOCs, low energy consumption, and ultimately low replacement, so less waste. And that is, that's where the technology came from. It was just a kind of a brilliant spark. But it took some time to get there, to get it developed. And I joined. My interest is to get this out and commercialize it because we are well proven and ready to go.
Yeah, no, great. So you're saying that literally, so in terms of its performance, how effective is it then at capturing, like acting as a mousetrap? So, capturing the CO2.
Yeah. So if you think about a flue gas stream from let's say just a mid-sized power plant, 550 megawatt natural gas power plant. It's a big plant. It will produce on an annual basis about 1.5 million tons of CO2. So you've seen bigger plants and smaller plants, but that's, that is kind of that ratio is slides. It's always kind of that it's a heavy CO2 producer that you burn. And so traditionally amines, we're in the 85 to 90% capture. So you'd build this facility. And so you would capture, if you had 1.5 million tons, you're going to capture everything but 150,000 tons that you're still going to burn. And but lately, the industry has gotten better as a whole, and ION in particular. And now the standard has moved to 95% capture. And so you're capturing almost all of the CO2. And then what's really interesting about an ION solvent is we decided last year to really push the limits and how far can our tech go? And we actually demonstrated at TCM pilot and at the enterprise pilot that we can capture 99.6% of the CO2 in the flue gas. So almost all of it. And so the flue gas that's exiting our absorber actually has less CO2 in it than pre-industrial atmosphere. So it really is not only a carbon capture, but it's also a carbon removal system. So it's, I think of it as a point source DAC or direct air capture, because we're actually pulling more CO2 out of the air than was in it originally. And so it's interesting where we can go with that. You know, right now, you know, we compete in the 95% world, but we're the only guys that can really go to 99.6% and do it cost effectively and do it for, you know, tens of thousands of hours. I know that there's some value there, and we're working at ION to figure out commercially how we help our customers understand that value. And that's really been, with some hyperscaler discussions, that becomes very interesting to them, because, you know, they're out there buying, you know, credits for carbon removal. And now we can kind of give them their cake and eat it too, where they can get a decarbonized electron plus some removal. And that if we can verify that with an independent source, they're like, this is something that could be really interesting. And that's what I've got to get out and tell the story, and so that people understand that.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, it sounds awesome. And are you currently verifying it then? That's quite a complex process from what I understand.
The solvent is complex in how we make it, but, you know, the process really isn't. It's still, you know, you have an absorber and a stripper and you run your solvent through it, and it's, you know, very typical. We do work with Coke out of Wichita. They have developed some internals, some special type of metal grating that allows our solvent to operate more efficiently. And so it's been great to work with them. So there are some mechanical changes, but it's really about the solvent. My CTO here, Eric Muehleman, he's really one of the key drivers behind this third generation solvent and what he terms deep decarbonization. And so we just recently published a paper at one of the big conferences called GHGT just a couple of weeks ago. That is a peer-reviewed publication on deep decarbonization. So we're just really getting that going, and we think it will be a standard part of our offering here in 2025.
Okay, awesome. And what kind of impact do you think this can have, just in terms of if you were to fast forward the next kind of 10 years or so? Like, have you started to give, I'm sure you have started to give us some thought, but yeah, maybe talk a little bit about that kind of longer term kind of impact when it comes to decarbonization.
The numbers get real big, real fast. And so, you know, as I mentioned, a relatively small or medium-sized power plant is 1.5 million tons per year. What do you do with that CO2? So we've captured it, we've compressed it, we've got it ready. And, you know, if you look at a lot of the really interesting technologies on, CO2 utilization, whether it's mineralization or green e-fuels or what have you, that all sounds great. But the volumes of CO2 we produce just crush all that. And so you've got to go to geologic sequestration to really make a difference. And we're seeing companies like Oxy, we're seeing Exxon with their Denbury acquisition, we're seeing Chevron, we're seeing some of the energy majors that have the expertise around geology and wells and petroleum engineering, and they're aggressively moving forward with building these CO2 sinks.
Right.
And in fact, here in the United States, we've got what we call a Class 6 well permitting process, and a number of wells have been permitted and beginning to inject. Australia is really the leader in the world, and they already are injecting tremendous amounts of CO2 in saline aquifers. That technology, when I mentioned earlier that the permitting and the economics are starting to come together, that sequestration piece is really important to unlock the value that we can bring. And it's happening, and it's economic, and it works. It doesn't leak out. I mean, it's gone forever. That combination of our technology at 99% plus sequestration, the impact is huge. We will just a few power plants, and we'll be removing millions of tons of CO2 from the atmosphere, and that's far exceeds anything that's out there today. And these are power plants that we need, that we use the power every day. And I like the fact that we can capture a little bit more, but what's more important is that we can capture this huge volume percentage and put it away forever. And that, I think for me and the ION team, we really can make a difference, and we can really provide this decarbonized electron.
In what form would it get stored?
It's gaseous. So
Yeah.
CO2 is an interesting beast. It, at normal temperatures and pressures, like what we live at today, it's just a gas. You open your soda and the CO2 bubbles out of it. That's what we all kind of understand. But as you pressurize CO2 up into very, very higher levels, over 1800, PSI, it becomes what we call a dense phase liquid, which it actually is still a gas, but behaves like a liquid. And so when you do that, you can put in the concentrations that you can then sequester and store become, 100 orders of magnitude more, because it starts to behave like a liquid. So it is actually a molecule that's well designed from the beginning to be able to do this sequestration, because you get it to dense phase, and then you can store massive amounts in, a typical saline reservoir. So, a power plant, multiple power plants for 30 years can go into a typical sequestration well. And that's because of the nature of the molecule itself.
So you could you store it away and it will, I'm just picturing what some of these wells look like and how deep they go, as it were. And
they just look like a regular gas well, and they're not very deep. 6,000 feet, depends on geology. 6,000 feet, that's typical. The Earth has been storing CO2 that way for billions of years. And we're just adding, in the global scheme of things, a small amount to that number. And so it's happening now. In fact, here in the U.S. and other areas of the world, they actually tap natural CO2 reservoirs to do what we call enhanced oil recovery. And so we can certainly replace that with engineered CO2. But it sounds unique, it sounds different, but it really isn't. The world's life cycle has been doing this since the dawn of time, and we're just augmenting it for our purpose.
Yeah, someone was telling me the other day, I can't think it was 57 billion tons of CO2 emission globally at the moment, something along those lines, or something crazy.
The numbers are staggering, and that's why we need big solutions.
Yeah.
I'm all for it, and in fact, sit on boards and invest in some really unique utilization companies. But, even if we were just successful beyond our wildest dreams, we would never really have true impact on those big.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious, in terms of scaling this, what does it kind of look like? How do you commercialize it?
That's another unique thing, and something that I really liked about ION is that there are large-scale amine plants in operation today. And so the scale risk, there's no mechanical scale risk. So I don't have to go out, and my team doesn't have to build a new machine, and that new machine needs to, either work or not. So, you have this huge step-up risk.
Yeah.
And we see that all the time.
Yeah.
Particularly in the energy technology space. But with ours, we don't have that. So we can go into an amine plant that, the engineering firms, Kiewit, for example, they've built hundreds of these. And so they know exactly how to build these plants. But what's the difference is our solvent can come in. And that's where we can really get to this high, deep decarbonization with no emissions. And so, we get, our customer gets a performance increase because of our solvent and a emissions reduction because of our solvent. But at the end of the day, Simon, if let's just say it's a black swan event and things don't go well, and our solvent, it does not perform as we thought it would, then you can put a traditional amine in it, and the plant will still run. It's just going to run at a lower capture rate, lower efficiency, and you're going to have to put some additional emission controls equipment. But there's no zero black start, risk that we have. And so when we think about how do we make our projects financeable, bankable, at the end of the day, these are big projects. Anything in the energy industry is big. And so you got to get out there and not only get your sponsor, your customer to convince that this is the right solution, but you also have to get their financiers, whether it's a hedge fund or a PE fund or project finance banks. they have a whole different level of criteria that they need to see. And so we've been working, my team here has been working closely on developing, a full package with our engineering partners and with Coke, our equipment supplier partner, and then Ion, so that we can deliver a fully baked performance guarantee around our technology that is recognized by the banking community and is financeable. And, we're in the throes of doing that today, but we've made tremendous progress. And I think in 25, in 26, you're going to see us announce some FIDs, or what we call final investment decisions, when the money comes in, to build some of these big projects. And because of the nature of our technology pathway, in that we don't have a whole new machine with a lot of risk.
Yeah.
And we're really only worried about that 20% or 25% performance increase. That's all we really have to guarantee. And so I think that is really what's going to allow us to, what I call bridge the valley of death, between, sponsors that love the technology and a private equity firm that'll actually put money behind. And that's where I think we, Ion in particular, are really going to be able to distinguish ourselves.
Yeah, no, awesome. Yeah, I hear this an awful lot in this particular space, like new of a kind technologies, first of a case kind of deployment. I mean, you see it a little bit with some of the biochar, some of the hydrolysis kind of technology, but you see it with direct air capture as well. It's new. It's expensive. There's lots of technology. It's quite difficult to get that stuff bankable, isn't it?
Almost impossible. So, and we call it FOAK, first FOAK, first of its kind. And that is the real challenge. And some of the players out there in the carbon capture space in particular, I can't really mention their names, but they've done a great job of getting government sponsorship, be it the United States or Canada or Europe, to build that first plant, to build that thing. And that's really important. And Ion, we're kind of the same way. We've got in partnership with Calpine, we're won one of the Department of Energy's what they call Major Demo Award, which is a $270 million grant, non-dilutive grant to the project. That's what it takes. And the guys that are, the folks that are companies that are serious in this space, that's what we're focused on. We're focused on commercialization. Used to be we were focused on regulation change. And sure, it can get better. Sure, the Trump administration, things are going to change. But at the end of the day, the economic incentive and the customer imperative is there. And we have to get through this, this first of its kind, or this financeable project background. And that's what I really like about Ion. Is that, that challenge is just much lower for us. It's still there, and we're working through it. We're not done yet, but I'm confident we can achieve it.
Yeah, no, great. And hats off to the DOE as well, right? I see the support and, small companies with innovations need support, need non-dilute. It's not just about venture firms coming in but non-diluted capital to help kind of provide the kind of support. So I think the US do that very well.
Yeah, and the DOE has been an important part of Ion's life. And we have a great partnership with them and a tremendous amount of respect for their technical capabilities and how they've really gone out on a limb with us and others and said, hey, we're not picking winners, but we're going to back technologies that, our scientists think can make a difference. And so it's been really great working with them. And I was at one meeting and everybody was kind of picking on the DOE guys. And I was like, hey, sorry about that. And they were like, hey, this is nothing. You haven't had to sit in front of Congress and defend what we're doing, because that's hard. But they've done a great job. And, I think even under the new administration, hopefully that will continue the robustness of what the DOE has been doing. And, it was back in the first Trump administration was robust as well. So I don't see a huge change there. And particularly in our space where we can advance clean fossil fuel. I think that is something that's going to be really important. and not to get too technical, but we've got some tax incentives we call 45Q that are very important for the financing of these that have been supported through the Trump and the Biden administration. And I think will continue to be so. And then, the direct DOE support. But don't discount, Canada and Europe. They've been very aggressive. The Canadians in particular have been very focused on providing true non-dilutive grants. And we've seen some of our fellow companies in the space get some extraordinary working capital, non-dilutive working capital to move their projects forward. We're not hugely in Canada at this time, but we do look forward to that as a future market.
Yeah. What do you think is the key to commercialization success for you over the next kind of, 3 to 5 years, as it were?
The key is bankability. Bankability and affordability. So it's the ability to, these developers of power plants, these buyers of blue electrons, they have their financiers and their carbon regulatory teams. They can have confidence in the technology is going to perform and that the electron that's actually delivered has a real independently verifiable carbon intensity associated with it. And that is critically important. And that's what's happening now. ION in particular, we had a recent investment by Williams, the big pipeline company here in the United States. And they have a fantastic program they call Next Generation Gas, where they are actually working with a technology company backed by Microsoft, as well as a large accounting firm that will be able to, from the wellhead through the transport delivery to the power plant, and then through the power plant, they're going to be able to deliver a certificated, independently verifiable electron carbon intensity. And that is something that is new to the industry and is something that's critically important for us to be successful. So it's really the bankability. Can they get these things financed, and will a large project finance firm put hundreds of millions of dollars to work on debt facility? That's kind of one, and we're getting very close to getting that done. And two, can the carbon management teams of the buyers of those electrons feel comfortable that these are very, very high quality carbon credits and meet their very robust standard? Because I think, as you know, there's been some shifty stuff in that world over the past 10 years.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that bit. I don't know how it's evolving now and where it is. When you talk to customers of potential, who are going to buy these, how do you see this market evolving for these types of solutions?
First of all, it's about education. So next year, I'm going to be out there evangelizing the blue carbon, the blue molecule, and the blue electron. Got to get them to understand that this is real, available, and affordable. And then the second thing is we've got to build that backbone to where we can withstand the rigors of the carbon rating system. There's some really great new companies coming out, like B0 and others that are actually acting like an S&P, and they're rating these carbon credits. And that's independent companies doing that. That's what needs to happen, so that a Microsoft or somebody else that wants to buy one of these credits, whether it's a nature-based credit or an engineered credit, they can have confidence that what they're buying truly is real. And so we've kind of gone through the cowboy stage of that world, and now independent real verification is key, and that ecosystem of players, software providers, and engineers and regulators are starting to recognize that it can be done and done accurately and cost effectively and deliver a real certificated result.
Yeah, when you think about potential customers who are going to buy these credits, you hear a lot of feedback from how serious they are really about their emissions, for instance, and about whether they're really just buying it for offset purposes as opposed to sustainability being at the core of their operations. Do you see anything evolving on that side?
I think one company in particular, Microsoft, has been out there and really putting their money where their mouth is and really, really moving forward. We need more customers to do that, and I think as twofold. One is the regulatory and credit rating system becomes more confident. then you'll see more companies entering the space. Because the worst thing to do is to go out and spend a bunch of money for 10 years of carbon credits and then find that those are, I don't want to say bogus, but, are not as strong as they were made out to be. If I was the buyer of that and recommending my management, I would, that would be something I'd be very worried about. And so as that is, that part of this ecosystem is becoming stronger, I think we'll see more people come in. But also, I think a little bit maybe selfish for Ion is that if we can do that and be part of their value chain, i.e. supply of electricity that they need to expand their business, then I think it becomes even, a much stronger imperative for them and a lot easier for them to do that because they're not out, buying things in the marketplace, but they're actually saying, okay, I need to meet my carbon goals and I need to buy a bunch of power, and this Ion solution partnered with, XYZ power provider. We're going to be able to do that whilst buying our electrons anyway. And so that's going to be a lot easier, but that's what next year is about, for me is making, providing that whole ecosystem and making it verifiable, and then getting customers to truly understand that it's available and affordable and real. And, right now, I don't want to say there's skepticism. It's just they don't know, and they think it's very expensive, and they think that it's not net zero, and it can be, and that's what we got to get over.
Yeah. Do you think there's this challenge of early stage innovation and technology that hasn't necessarily delivered or is too expensive, and there's almost a fatigue about some of the solutions out there? Is that something you have to battle against?
Yeah, for sure. Been doing this for 40 years, and there is fatigue around it. Particularly in what I guess clean tech 1.0. Mid 2000s. Just huge amounts of venture dollars poured into the space, thinking that clean tech was like the software business. Build it once and sell it 10,000 times. This industry is just not. You got to put real hardware in the ground, real steel, real concrete. It takes a lot of money, and so a lot of money was wasted on frivolous things that made investors very jaded. And as we move forward into clean tech 2.0 and now what we call energy transition, I think that there's a more of a reticence, or we're going to get the technical people to sign off on it first. And I'll give you a great example. One of our investors is Carbon Direct out of New York, and they're a very interesting firm. There's a capital arm, which is our investment, but they also have their main business is a scientific called Carbon Direct, where they advise all kinds of companies on carbon, the carbon intensity and what's real and what's not. It's a big business for them, but they lead with the science. So, if they want to make an investment, they get their scientists to look at this first and say, okay, we're not violating the laws of thermodynamics here. We're not doing some crazy stuff. This is legitimate science that will really work. And that's their first bar before they even look at what the private company is. And we're seeing that, more and more with other large investors, that they bring in credible scientific and engineering talent to do the review early on, so that we don't, they don't get lost in the hype of whatever this latest thing is, and that they're really investing in companies that can get
amazing. And how many people work at the company now?
We've got 48, so we've pretty much doubled over the last year. Our headquarters is here in Boulder, which is Colorado, which, if your listeners don't know, it's up in the Rocky Mountains, and it's just gorgeous. It's just a beautiful place. And so all of our R&D and engineering teams are here. But we most recently opened an office in Houston, downtown Houston, where most of our customers are. And we're expanding that from both commercial and engineering capabilities to offer customer solutions. So, with us, back, because we're not building, a new machine or building a bunch of equipment to supply that machine, we can remain relatively small people-wise because we can outsource engineering to our engineering partners. And that's the goal here with me, is to make sure that, our dear capital that we raise in the venture rounds goes as long as it can, and we get as much progress as we can. And I'm not having to go out build a big machine, a big factory. It's work that can be done in house or with our engineering partners. So we can get a lot done with a relatively small team. But next year, just to give you a stat, we had 2 feeds in earlier this year, what we call front end engineering and design programs. That's kind of the meat of the first level of engineering, and can be rather expensive. But now we have 6 in the shop, and so we're adding more engineering capacity to deliver to customers. And so we'll continue to grow through 25 and 26, but we're never going to be thousands of people.
No. But tell me though, like just from a cultural viewpoint, like how clearly a really innovative. How do you go about kind of fostering that culture that supports innovation and long?
Well, it's just really leveraging off of Dr. Brown and the work that he did. I mean, he truly is an innovator and a scientist, and he hired like-minded scientists. I've got a lot of PhDs that work here. I think the stat, and I might be wrong, but I think the stat, there's more PhDs per capita in Boulder, Colorado than anywhere else in the world. So we've got a great pool from which to choose from here. And so we have, a real scientific effort here. Our scientists are not just thinking about the next commercial deal. They're out publishing papers, peer reviewed. We'll hopefully be in some peer reviewed magazines over the next couple of years. And so for me, it's to continue to foster that scientific intellectual capability and allow them to do their work, to publish their work. Sometimes a commercial guy like me could get really closed in, like, hey, we don't want anybody to know about this. But that's not really how the scientific community works. And and we need that independent verification to be able to do that. So, open-minded, keep that innovative culture going and augment that. That's kind of my core pillar. And then let's bring some real commercial and financial rigor to the business and do that in a way that helps bolster, everybody's confidence here within ION, but also as an investor puts their hard-earned money into ION, they have confidence that we have the financial controls and the governance structure to be able to manage that effectively. And so combining those two things, it's often at odds, but here we've been able to navigate it. I've been doing this a long time. I like to have fun. I do this because this is what I like to do. And so I try to get that done across the board. So we have monthly outings and quarterly functions, and everybody's included. We got, an open house in Houston and a holiday party up here in Boulder where people can bring their friends and spouses. And we just really try to promote a culture where it's fun to come to work and you like the people that you work with and you trust them. I'm a huge advocate of that. And, I'm right here in Boulder. I moved up here to do this from Houston, and I sit right in the middle of everybody. And that's because I want to be part of the team, and I want to make sure that they know that I'm listening to what they are worried. And it's worked well. I mean, it's worked well at previous companies, and I know I can. I'm already building on a great culture, and I can just take it to the next step.
No, awesome. I mean, it must be as well finding talent that you want to come and join you. Really keying into the mission, really keying in what you're doing differently, and I would imagine that is a very compelling proposition.
We've really seen that, particularly with the younger generation. The folks that are just either coming out of school or 5 years out of school. They really want to be part of this. They understand that it's real and that it has a real meaningful impact for them in their lifetime, but also their future generations. And they want to be here and they want to be part of it. And they understand that, there's no silver bullet out there that's going to automatically fix all this. And so we have true dedicated people that really want to make a difference. And that's not just in our team, but it's also in our investor base and it's in our customer base. And we want to be able to do that real affordably and now. And that's why, we can pick from the best on our interview candidates. Our head of HR, she works really hard and interviews hundreds of candidates for every spot. And everybody that we hire has just been kind of fun.
Yeah, fantastic. Awesome. Listen, thanks so much, Tim, for joining me today on the show and sharing your insights. It's so inspiring to see what ION Clean Energy you guys are doing in the innovation in the carbon capture space.
Well, thank you for the time. I mean, it's been fun working with you, Simon, and really look forward to more in the future. And keep your eye on Ion. I think that we've been relatively quiet, which has been a good thing as we developed our technology. But now I think we're going to become a real player in global industry. And I just couldn't be more excited about the opportunities that we have ahead.
Awesome. Well, I wish you all the continued success in shaping a real sustainable future. And thanks to my audience for tuning in to this great conversation, and catch you on the next show.
Great. Take care, Simon.